Has it been a week? Doesn't feel like it's been a week. I was hoping to talk about Thor this week, but my comic store didn't get any Marvel books this week. It was I guess, a truck. Something happened to the truck, Marvel truck, so we didn't get any Marvel or Dark Horse. So I don't have Helen of Windhorn #2 to talk about, and I don't have Thor to talk about. So I got some other stuff to talk about, mostly horror comics, but we'll start with the one non-horror, or one of two non-horrors. Wonder Woman. So I already gave my Tom King defense rant, but Wonder Woman's excellent. It's still one of the best books in the stands. The story finally has Wonder Woman facing off against the King, and it's a pretty cool story. I don't want to give anything away. The backup story is another hilarious Trinity story that I really dug. Not much to add on that I haven't already added with this, but Wonder Woman's culminating and going some cool directions. Uh, Cobra Commander, also don't have much to say. It's that I haven't already said. Um, it looks like the issue after this one is going to finally establish Cobra, but this one it has the twist that kind of leads into Cobra Commander becoming Cobra Commander. Fun comic, great art. I've recommended it before. Keep reading it. All right, so now for some stuff I haven't talked about. Golgotha Motor Mountain. This is This is a horror comic, sort of Lovecraftian horror. But there's a lot of other shit going on. It's like a redneck comedy on top of that, and it's very experimental. There's like uh, manga stuff in this, and the narration sometimes has these like weird layers and these it'll like break the fourth wall, or there'll be uh, David Foster Wallace esque uh, footnotes. It's very experimental. I'm actually kind of surprised to see it. I don't think I've seen something this experimental come out of IDW. I can't really even tell you what the story's about. I mean, it's about a meteor falls from space and creates people start taking the meteor as shavings from the meteor and using them as meth, and it turns people into monsters. But it's way weirder and more psychedelic than that. The art is really good, and very like as experimental as the concept. Like the really, when I say experimental, the artwork is changing throughout. It's always like going in different interesting directions. I don't know. It's just weird horror. It's fun. I'm enjoying it so far. Golgotha and Motor Mountain. I guess I don't have much to say this week, except this comic I have a lot to say about. Zoe Thurgood is an Eisner winner for an autobiographical comic she did, and this is the fourth and final issue of her Hack Slash Back to School. Now, I've never read Hack Slash before. I had a friend in college who loved Hack Slash. If you haven't read it, it's a Tim Seeley comic. Tim Seeley's a really good writer. But it is essentially it's a final girl from a horror movie, and after surviving a horror movie, she goes on to become a serial killer, or not a serial killer, a monster hunter. Like she hunts down slashers, they call them. So like usually they're, I guess, like could be monsters or could just be like slasher villains, like Jason and shit like that. There's been a lot of crossovers with official horror franchises. Like there was Hack Slash versus Chucky, Hack Slash versus Reanimator, Hack Slash versus Army of Darkness. But also like it has its own monsters. It was very cheesecakey, very Suicide Girls esque covers and fashion, like a lot of like goth and alternative like hot girls. So like very cheesecake, very horror. I guess the kind of like video store horror, not the more sophisticated thinking type horror, is the impression I got having never read it. But that's what the covers looked like. But my friend who was a big horror fan, she loved it. She thought it was cool. So Zoe Thorogood, as I just mentioned, is an Eisner winner. And this isn't really her, like, I guess what people would have expected her to do after doing an autobiographical comic that won her an Eisner. But I read an interview with her where they asked her, why Hack Slash? Why is that your next project? And she's like, well, it was my favorite comic growing up. So, so yeah, this comic is a masterpiece. These 4 issues are so good. I've again never read the series. This was a prequel, so it was easy for me to get into. Uh, the Her art, like, this is really, I mean, I to use the word again, experimental. She's trying new things on every page. The art style shifts so much based on her mood and what the mood of each scene. It's funny, it's scary, it's sexy, it's fun, it's tragic. Like, this final issue does all of those things. And there's a page turn in this that scared me, and I stared at it for several minutes, just pouring over the artwork. And then the next page was even scarier. She's really got a talent for horror, and if this is where she wants to go with her work, I really would love to see more. I'm going to check out her other stuff too, but this was phenomenal. I wish it was an ongoing series. It's heartbreaking to see that it's already over after just 4 issues, but wow, I can't wait to see where she goes next in her career. Uh, because our 4 issues are out, I would recommend that you wait for the trade paperback, which is already coming out pretty soon. Also, it looks like Thorogood herself cosplayed the main character and did some photos for the trade paperback, so I might buy it just for that. That sounds really fun. Yeah, this is friggin' phenomenal. Of all the horror comics I've read lately, I think this has some of my favorite art. I don't know if it's quite as scary as The Sickness, which I'll talk about later, but uh, it's just gorgeous. It's just a joy, and it's doing things that you can only do in comics. That page turn I talked about, I think you can. That's the kind of horror that only works in a comic book, where the turning the page is scary. It's wonderful. Final comic is not a horror comic, but I guess maybe it's still violent. So, if you like horror for that. I've already talked about I Heart Skull Crusher, but I have a little more to say this time. Issue 2 improves on the first issue in every way, and I loved the first issue. That I talked about that in my first video. So the second issue fleshes out the characters a bit more and actually tells us the rules of I keep forgetting the name of the sport. I think it's intense paintball or something paintball. So screaming paintball. That's it. Screaming paintball as PB. So this one actually fleshes out the rules, which is that essentially it's soccer. You kick the ball through the other team's goal to score 5 points. But if you kill someone who's holding the ball, you score a point. If you kill someone who's not holding the ball, the opposing team scores 2 points. So essentially, you want to try to kill people. Oh, and you can also kill them if they're within the goal zone. So yeah. So they actually say, like, sometimes it's worth the point penalty to murder your opponent's team if they have a really good defense and you want to thin out their defense to score a few goals. Also, heads count as balls. So if you knock someone's head, if you decapitate someone and get their head through the goal, that also counts as scoring. Despite how freaking violent that sounds, this is still a kid's comic. Like, this is Boombox is Boom's, kids, like, young adult line. And it still somehow manages to maintain a kid-friendly tone despite how freaking horrendous that sounds. So far, I'm not sure if we've seen anyone actually get murdered on screen, but we have seen a bunch of people turn into zombies in this issue, because that ends up also being a thing. It's very goofy, very lighthearted, and the main character, like, despite, like, the main character wanting to get into this murder sport, she's still the, like, spunky shonen protagonist you would expect. Like, she kind of acts like Deku or someone. She's, like, very noble for, like, it's very cute. So yeah, again, what I have to praise here is the excellent artwork. The artwork in this series is really detailed, colorful, expressive. The characters just look wonderful. I said before that the character designs remind me of Gurren Lagann, but they're definitely very manga-esque. Excellent, excellent series. I hope this is an ongoing. This might be another mini series, but it's fun. My one disappointment is apparently there was a Ryan Gonzalez. I don't know how her name is pronounced. Ryan Gonzalez, my favorite artist. She did a alternate cover that was a incentive cover, so I didn't get a hold of it. A lot of her covers end up being incentive covers because she's a really good cover artist, and it's a shame because I want those covers, but I don't like paying incentive prices. So anyway, that's all I got this week. I'll be back soon, hopefully with Thor and hopefully with some more comics. See you around.